Hello and welcome back to the African Union Profile. My name is Sheikh Musa Drame. I am your host. Today we will continue on discussing about Africa's progress and what is happening in Africa. But the most beautiful thing today is that we have a guest who is very, very familiar with Africa's newest independent state. And that state is South Sudan. We've been discussing what is happening in Africa, the positive and not so positive, some of the developments. Last week, I talked to you a little bit about the new African headquarters donated by China and actually inaugurated by the Chinese president yesterday. We have different points of views. Some said, well, that's a good gesture, donating $200 million to build the African headquarters. Some said, what are they getting for donating, that large amount of, money? But whatever the case, it's a beautiful, beautiful structure. And according to the reports we've seen, it has everything that they needed, and now they're able to provide all the services just like the United Nations. And on top of that, one of the Africa's richest businessmen is building a new hotel right next to it, so that when dignitaries have their meetings, they would not have to go to other hotels far away. So everything will be within the compound. So we're very excited about that development. So even though there are a lot of questions about the motive of the Chinese people for donating such amount to build the building. And the second, I just want to make an announcement, quick announcement before I forget. As we've been seeing in the media, print media as well as electronic media, what is happening in Nigeria, the largest, most populous nation in Africa. There are individuals creating havoc, murdering innocent people for whatever name. We don't care. Anybody who's willing to murder people cannot call any legitimate name, because there's no way you can legitimize killing people. It doesn't matter what difference between you and them. So we are holding a joint and unified interfaith press conference on Thursday, February 9, from 11 to 12 at Al-Iman Community Center on Westchester Avenue. If anyone wants to join us, you can call me, and my number will be given at the end of the program. And also, next month, which begins tomorrow, the Black and Latino Caucus in Albany, for the first time, African Union Day is participating, meaning that we are going to bring some African scholars, individuals such as Dr. Jibril Jallo from the United Nations, one of the most famous African diplomat who spent more than 30 years with the United Nations. He will be one of the panelists, and many such other African scholars and diplomats. So we will talk to you more about that particular program, and also if anybody wants to participate and come with us to Albany, we can give you further logistics of it. But today, as I said, the most important show yet is to announce the independence of one of the African most prosperous nation. But unfortunately, South Sudan has not really received fair treatment from its former colony, we can call it that way, Northern Sudan. And today, we have with us someone that will give you a lot about South Sudan, the historical perspective, the current situation, and where South Sudan is heading. And our guest is none other than Dr. Jane Kani Edward. And Dr. Edward was born actually in South Sudan and raised in South Sudan and received her education in Sudan and Egypt and Canada. She received her PhD in sociology in education from the University of Toronto in 2004. And currently, she is a clinical assistant professor and director of African Immigration Research, Department of African and African American Studies at Fordham University. She teaches courses on African history, women in Africa, and contemporary African immigration to the United States. Her areas of research interest centers on refugee and immigrant women's experience, human rights and education, gender, race, class and representation, gender issues in conflict and post-conflict situations, and African immigration to the United States. Dr. Edward carries out research work among South Sudanese refugees and internally displaced persons in Egypt, Uganda, and Southern Sudan. She is the author of Sudanese Women Refugees, Transformations and Future Imaginings, and several books, and also several books and chapters and articles. So, again with us, Dr. Edward. So, we welcome you to the African Union profile, second time, but first time as an independent citizen of South Sudan. Dr. Edward.
Thank you, Sheikh Musa Drame, for having me on the program. And I'm very happy to be here for the second time talking about my independent nation of South Sudan.
Thank you. So the first thing that I would do is really to congratulate you and all the South Sudanese citizens who have endured one of the most difficult coexistence in the history of Africa. But finally, because of persistence and hard work and strong commitment, South Sudan now is an independent nation, the newest in Africa. So what does it mean to you, and I'm sure to all the South Sudanese, to be independent?
Thank you for congratulating me for the independence of our nation. Mm-hmm. And actually the independence of South Sudan means a lot, mm-hmm. not only to me, but to other Southern Sudanese. Mm-hmm. And it also means a different thing, mm-hmm. for different people. Mm-hmm. First, the people of Southern Sudan went through a lot of difficulties to gain their independence. They fought for more than 50 years. First, the 17-year civil war that started in 1955, just 1 year before the independence of Sudan, okay. from the British colonial rule. Southern Sudanese took up arms and fought the government in the north for 17 years. And in 1972, they were able to reach an agreement between the government at that time and the Southern Sudan Liberation Movement in Addis Ababa. And the agreement was called the Addis Ababa Agreement of 1972. And after 10 years of relative peace in Sudan and the South in particular, another war also erupted from 1983, and that war actually continued until 2005, when the two sides, the Sudan government and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, an army, signed an agreement in Naivasha, Kenya in 2005, and that actually ended the two wars that took place in Sudan between the North and the South. So the road to independence of the new nation in Africa was not easy. It was so difficult, it was costly and painful for many people because many people died during these conflicts. Some people lost their livelihoods, others were displaced from their original lands, and they ended up either internally displaced inside Sudan, or others crossed the borders and became refugees, while others ended up in North America, Europe, like myself. I ended up here, not because of my choice, but because of the conditions that were there in the country.
So before you continue, can you describe to our viewing audience where South Sudan is actually? I mean, geographically.
Geographically, South Sudan is now considered part of the East African region.
East African, okay.
Yeah. But before the split of the country into two, Sudan was considered as part of Northeast Africa.
Okay.
And the main reason was that because the governments in Khartoum by then wanted to link the country to the Arab world and the Middle East.
Okay.
So geographically, the South now is in East Africa.
Okay.
East Africa region. Or sometimes you can put it together with the other regional bodies that were created later, like the Horn of Africa, although it's not at the Horn, but it's almost close to the countries at the Horn of Africa. So it's in East Africa.
Okay. Lately, besides the conflicts, one prominent news that comes out of Sudan has been oil.
Yeah.
So where is the oil in Sudan, or in Sudan and South Sudan?
Actually, most of the oil fields are found in the south.
Okay.
That's one thing. And the oil infrastructure, like the pipeline that carries the oil to the port at the Red Sea, the port is called Port Sudan,
Okay.
was built during the conflict, and was built by the government in Khartoum. So technically, the oil infrastructure belongs to the new country of the Republic of Sudan.
Okay.
But most of the oil fields are found in South Sudan, the new country. So that's what I can say for now.
Yes, okay. You know, a new nation, you see, it is difficult to run even an old democracy, much less a new nation, new people, new infrastructure, new leadership, new system. So do you think South Sudan has what it takes to succeed?
At the moment, no. And there are several reasons why. Because the South actually was not developed even before it was independent. Like even during the colonial period, the South was not developed, whether in terms of infrastructure or their cultures and other important aspects of the society. Because most of the resources, although the South is rich in many resources, the resources was taken out of South to develop the northern part of the country. And that was the problem, because most of the governments that came to power immediately after the colonial period, the British colonial rule in Africa, in Sudan, actually focused on the development of the center. That's the Khartoum, the capital city of the Republic of Sudan, and the other northern part of the country.